Hey, what's up guys, it's Nick2. Today I'm going to be showing you guys a nearly perfected Pulverize Druid build, which is one of the best builds in all of Diablo 4 Season 9, with it topping out at number 3 on the pit leaderboards, being pretty comparable to the likes of Sorcerer, which is actually pretty surprising. But also one of the great things about this build is that it just works really well right out of the gate. Due to the new Rotting Lightbringer unique, this effectively just makes your Pulverize do an insane amount of additional damage. You spawn these little puddles on the ground that just do a crap load of damage, which are then also going to guarantee that your Pulverize is always an overpower. Pretty much the second that you get this thing, it's just a free ride up to Torment 4. It's extremely easy to set this build up, and it surprisingly is actually good at like doing a lot of speed farm content. You can kind of just fly through the game with the way that I have it set up, and very easily progress into those higher tiers of the pit to fill out your glyphs, etc. This build is a ton of fun to use. If you've never used Pulverize before, I'd highly recommend it. You can set this build up to pretty much no difficulty. It is extremely straightforward, and I'm very surprised with how powerful it is. The damage on it is like actually really good. Without further ado, let's just get right into it. Of course, I will have the entirety of the build posted over on Mobalytics. I have an early endgame build. I don't have a leveling build at this point. There's tons of other leveling builds you could just find on Mobalytics here. I got this character power level, to be honest, but early endgame, ancestral endgame, and then a mythic all-rounder, and then mythic speed. Currently I have the mythic speed equipped, but it's extremely similar to the all-rounder, but feel free to just reference these depending upon where you are in the build process. These are all fairly similar. The difference between early endgame and ancestral endgame is simply just uniques. And then of course, the difference between ancestral and mythic is if you have mythic uniques and some like other slight optimizations. Getting into the build, it is actually fundamentally pretty basic. Of course, the single most important thing is getting the Rotting Lightbringer, which is basically going to, anytime that you Pulverize, it's going to spawn these puddles around you, and then if you attack while the puddle is here, it's going to then cause those puddles to splash, and then it's also going to guarantee that any hit subsequently is an overpower. Anytime that there isn't a puddle around, you will deterministically always spawn it, so you can effectively have guaranteed overpower procs on Pulverize, which was Pulverize's biggest problem in the past, is that like 1 in 3, 1 in 4 attacks was an overpower, and you have to stack all this annoying overpower crap. Now you just get it for free, and then also the puddles deal 50% of the 480% number above of like this poison damage over time. So we scale a lot of like poison damage related things, but this also just makes it do a ton of damage. Not to mention the item itself has very good stats on it, so you pretty much pick this up, you get it from Urivar or Varshan, and then you could just start blasting into the endgame. We pair the Rotting Lightbringer with this pretty insane aspect. While Grizzly Rage is active, your direct damage is actually converted then into poison damage, and we're going to have Grizzly Rage up all the time, which is very easy with just a lot of our tempers and stuff like that. And then also, while our Grizzly Rage is up, we have 100% increased crit damage, we have permanent unstoppable, we gain a lot of Fortify for free, you get a double damage multiplier, you get damage reduction. Grizzly Rage is insane, pretty much always has been, and it just synergizes perfectly with the build. We also make Pulverize an Earth skill, which just has some synergies in the skill tree. And of course, we use the Shockwave aspect so that the Pulverize can just hit a larger distance and just do extra damage. I'll quickly go over the skill tree, but everything will be in the planner below, and I'd highly recommend referencing this. This is a little bit more tweaked than my current in-game character, to be honest with you. I've kind of just been messing around with stuff, but the only thing that's particularly important or worthy of note is that you want to have Claw on your bar. I'll talk about this when I go into the gameplay section of the video, so feel free to skip to that if you're interested. And then we also put 1 point to Cyclone Armor, so just we have a permanent 21% non-physical damage reduction. Then for our actual skills, of course, we have the Pulverize here, which is important, and then we have Debilitating Roar, which is very good. It gives you 25% increased damage while it's active. It also gives you it reduces the enemy's damage by 40%. It also counts as a defensive skill, so that we get this node procced here, where you get 16% increased damage after casting a defensive skill. Then our next skill is Trample. This is literally just for movement, and Unstoppable doesn't really matter. We literally just use this for movement. I should have 1 point to it, so there you go. And then of course we have Grizzly Rage. I don't have Grizzly Rage maxed out because maxing it out doesn't really do anything. It just gives you increased armor. It does reduce the cooldown, but the cooldown is reduced more than enough, so I just shifted those points more into damage reduction and some damage related things. However, if you are missing armor, this is one way that you could get some. I'll have an armor section timestamped in the video as well. And then we have Ursine Strength. This gives you a lot of extra damage, max HP, pretty straightforward. You're always overpowering with this build, so this just gives you a ton of extra damage. All of the skills is literally just damage, 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 damage reduction, damage. Like there's just a whole bunch of damage in here. There's some things that you can swap around depending on what you need. Like for example, if you're fully maxed out on your resistances, you could swap out of Ancestral Fortitude and instead go into Vigilance for more damage reduction. You could decide to opt out of some of the damage nodes for more damage reduction that I don't have, such as like Iron Fur. If you feel like you have enough crit chance, you could swap out of Predatory Instinct and go into more damage reduction. There's honestly not much that you can really swap around, but if you have some sort of preference, feel free to do so. This is just how I have it set up. Quick, let's talk about spirit boons. So in the deer section, there are two options. You can either go for wariness if you are taking a lot of damage, or you can go for Gift of the Stag. This gives you additional spirit per second and maximum spirit. The reason that this is good is one of our runes has a potential to consume all of our spirit if we're trying to do a lot of damage, so that's why you'd have this. Otherwise, like 99% of the time, you'd go for wariness though, if you're not using that rune. Eagle is where we want to double up for swooping attacks and Avian Wrath. These have been like the best in this section literally for 2 years now, and they continue to be. This is just a whole bunch of extra damage. And then in the wolf section, you have two options. You can either go for Calamity early on into the build if you're having an issue keeping your Grizzly Rage up 100% of the time. But later into the build, like right now, just with it being even a little bit min-max, I have Grizzly Rage up 100% of the time super easily, in which case I just go for Energize for just a chance to fully restore your spirit. And Pulverize has a pretty decent lucky hit chance, especially with the Shockwave aspect hitting multiple enemies, so you proc your lucky hits fairly often. And for the last slot, you want to go for Obsidian Slam if you are speed farming. It just helps with like a little bit of consistency. If you're not speed farming, you want to go for Masochistic because this just gives you a crazy amount of healing, especially because, like I said, you are lucky hitting very regularly. Let's quickly go over which runes you actually want to go for because it can make somewhat of an impact. If you're super early into the build, you want to go something like Seer Gar because you're probably going to be low on crit chance. But once you're later on, what I have right now is kind of the speed farming setup, which I really like. So I have Igni Cry, which means that anytime that I just like cast my skill, I'm going to release a Spiritborn Vortex, which is very good for just grouping up the mobs, especially like speed farming context or higher tiers of the pit. You group them all up, get them to all be inside of that puddle that you spawn, and then you just blast them down. That is super helpful, pretty much regardless of the content that you're doing. And then when I'm speed farming, I like to use Bach plus Jaw, which is just when you travel, you gain the ability to teleport. This is very good for speed farming. You just run around and you gain the ability to teleport. You pretty much teleport to one pack, kill it, move on to the next one, and then you can already teleport again. It just helps you out a lot with your speed clear. If you are doing higher tiers of the pit, what you want to do is instead do Ahu plus Quawks instead of either Jaw or Cry. It depends on if you want the Vortex still or the teleport. I'd say in a high tier of the pit, the teleport isn't really going to do anything for you, right? So you'd rather just go for, I like to keep the Cry for the kind of crowd control, and it just helps you do more damage, especially in a higher tier setting, so you can group all the mobs up a little bit easier. But then you want to swap the teleport with Ahu plus Quawks. Ahu is just lucky hit chance, which you're going to be proccing a lot with your Pulverize as you're spamming it, and then Quacks is just casting a skill is going to give you a 100% damage increase with a 1 second cooldown. You'll stack this up pretty quickly. The issue is that this is going to drain your resource quite a lot, which is why you want to use a Gift of the Stag in addition to Energize. That'll pretty much solve it on its own, but you can also pair that with Reactive Ooze. I'll talk more about the Horadric Powers in a second, but that would pretty much give you infinite resource, so you don't have to worry about running out of resource. That's what I would do for the runes. I really like the Bach, Jaw, Igni, Cry combo, just super good for speed farming. We'll just go piece by piece. So starting off with the helmet, we have the Air of Perdition here. This thing is crazy for us because it gives core skill ranks, which Pulverize is. It gives you a lot of crit chance, which is helpful. The movement speed actually feels quite nice, and you get a 60% damage multi. If you have a Harlequin Crest, that's also an okay option, especially defensively, but Air of Perdition from an offensive perspective is just way better. If you don't have any mythic uniques, you can instead use Vasili's Prayer, like I have posted in the build link here. When it comes to what you want to prioritize on here, I would try to prio the ranks to core skills, greater affix, and then crit chance greater affix, and try to get all the masterworks to land on the core skills if you have a crit chance greater affix. If you don't have a crit chance greater affix, then you probably want the masterwork crits to land on the crit chance. Hopefully that makes sense. Second uber unique, you want to be Shroud of False Death. This thing just gives you +1 to all passives, which for almost every character is disgustingly broken because there's just so many damage related passives nowadays. Also gives you a lot of defense, so that's crazy. Get all stats, max life. Try to get one of those to be GA depending on if you want damage or defense, and then try to get the masterwork crits on, again, either all stats or max life. If you don't have a Shroud of False Death, you want to go for Insatiable Fury instead with greater affix to Earth Sign strengths bonuses. But Shroud of False Death is just disgustingly broken. For your gloves, you want to put on the Grizzly Rage aspect, so it makes Grizzly Rage last longer, and then while you're in Grizzly Rage, you basically do double damage, so that is really good, obviously. And then for the, I didn't even fully masterwork these, so I should probably do that. I didn't do that for my boots either. Some of my gear is a little bit scuffed. It's not like super good, but it's good enough, right? But for the gloves, the most important thing is getting ranks to Pulverize, and then second to that, I would try to get like Willpower, and then instead of max HP, you'd actually rather have attack speed here. This is what I have. I haven't been lucky with getting glove drops, and I don't really want to like go buy a pair or whatever. And then for your tempers, you want to temper on Pulverize size just so it hits in a larger area. And then you also want to do Werebear Overpower damage. Try to get the Masterwork crits to land on Pulverize or Willpower. That's perfectly fine. For your pants, you want to use Tibalt's Will. This just gives you a lot of damage reduction, and the all stats is quite nice from a damage perspective too. You also are permanently unstoppable just being in Grizzly Rage, so this gives you a lot of defense and damage. Try to get damage reduction while unstoppable greater affix, and probably crit that up. If you want more damage, just go for the all stats. On your boots, you want to put on Earthsign Horror so that Pulverize counts as an Earth skill. That's the only reason you're doing that, just because there's a lot of Earth skill related things in the skill tree, and it's free damage because it's on a movement speed / utility slot. On your actual boots, you want to put on Willpower, Armor, and then you could do movement speed or you could do resistance to all elements depending on what you want. Keep in mind you could also do Armor on the gloves technically instead of the max HP, but having it on the boots I'd say is a little bit more efficient. You could also have max HP instead of the move speed here, but I like to just have 100% move speed while I play. For the Rotting Lightbringer, the most important thing is actually the bottom roll being as close to 600% as possible. I got lucky with this one being a 2 greater affix, so I decided it was worth it rather than having the like a 600% with only 1 GA. You want the most important stat second to the bottom legendary roll is the chance for Pulverize to hit twice. And then you want to try to Masterwork crit that up to, it can get around 100% if you get a triple crit. And then next to that would be the Overpower percent. That gives you a ton of extra damage. Next mythic unique is Ring of Starless Skies. This is pretty good because it gives you a lot of attack speed, crit chance, and core skills, and just 50% damage multi after casting 5 times in a row, which is really good for us. Try to get the greater affix on either core skills or attack speed, and the crits to land on either one of those is perfectly fine. Not going to make too big of a difference there. And then your next ring, you just want one with a shockwave aspect, and you want to go for Willpower, attack speed. Probably go for the attack speed, greater affix, and then you want lucky hit chance to make enemies vulnerable. This is particularly good. You do get a little bit of vulnerable with the Horadric Power, but it's just like the uptime on it is very bad. The power is like slow, it doesn't keep up with you, so having a lucky hit chance to make enemies vulnerable on one ring is extremely important so that you have that consistency when playing. And then you want to temper on Werebear Overpower damage and Grizzly Rage cooldown reduction. If you don't have like greater affix crit chance on Air of Perdition or Ring of Starless Skies, for example, you might want to temper on Earth skill critical hit chance, which I actually have in the planner here, to help just make up for the loss of crit chance there. But I didn't need that because I have the greater affix on my Air of Perdition, so I instead went for just Werebear Overpower damage, but it really makes no difference. And then basically just tempering Grizzly Rage cooldown reduction here and on the Amulet and Grizzly Rage duration. That paired with the aspect will basically make it to where you have infinite Grizzly Rage uptime. And anytime you kill an enemy with Grizzly Rage, you'll increase the duration of it. So it's very easy to keep it up 100% of the time. If you're having even more problems, you could replace the damage aspect here for even more Grizzly Rage duration. The Amulet is a pain in the ass to get. I don't particularly have a good one. The most important thing you'd want is a greater affix to one of the good passives. The 2 best passives are in order Envenom and then Toxic Claws. These are pretty good. Some other good ones I think are like, I don't know actually, the rest of them are pretty weak in comparison to Envenom and Toxic Claws, so I would just go for those. If you can't get them, the next important thing would be Willpower percentage. It's just a lot of damage for you. You could also go for attack speed or crit chance if you are lacking in that department. Mine is okay. I just rolled on the Envenom here onto a greater affix with Willpower, and it's good enough. When it comes to jewels here, you can see that for the like special Horadric ones or whatever, I have the gain primary core stat and max life. That's just extra damage. And then this one just gives you a little bit of damage reduction. There's not really anything else to put here, so that's okay. And then we have 20% more LA damage and take 10% more. I believe the Pulverize counts as LA damage with the poison, so that should work for us, but neither here nor there. It's just good to get the extra armor and the resistance to elements there. On the topic of armor and resist, you can see I only have 600 armor and my resists aren't fully capped, but when I play, I just use instances. These are very cheap to craft. You can make hundreds and hundreds of them, and they are just generally good because they give you XP. So this gives me 10% all res and 150 armor, so basically caps my resistances by itself. And then you could also do another separate armor incense if you needed. I run around with this much because it's like not a problem, but there's another incense that gives you about like 300 flat armor. Instead, I just go for the flat HP there, and then I also do an elixir to give me 15% attack speed. If you feel like you're dying a lot and your defenses are scuffed, maybe your resistances are particularly low, and that's an issue, one thing you can do is instead of having Subo as your mercenary, you could get Rahir as your mercenary. And depending on if you need more armor or more res, you can get a 15% res on the right side and 15% armor on the left side. It's basically the same. I use Subo just to see stuff on the map. It's not particularly better from a damage perspective or anything. So do whatever you prefer there. Just keep in mind that the incenses are particularly helpful, namely Soothing Spices, than the one that gives you flat armor too. If you need even more armor and resist for some reason, you feel like it's a really big issue, you could swap the movement speed on the boots here for all res, or you could try to get armor on your gloves as well. For example, I could swap out my max life. You would lose a lot of damage because ideally this would be attack speed, but yeah. Another place that you could get some would be in the Paragon Board. The Paragon Board for the Druid build, and again, copy the one down in the description. It's a little bit more optimized than this current one right here. I was kind of just messing around with stuff, but in the Paragon Board, there's a lot of access to armor and resistance to all elements and stuff, so if you are having an issue with that, that's like really, really low or something, or you feel like you're dying a lot, you could kind of swap out of some damage-related stuff and try to prioritize the armor and resistance to all elements. The way that I have it set up in the description, in the build link rather, should be able to get you maxed out on your stats perfectly fine. There's nothing really too important or worthy of note in the skill tree here, or in the Paragon Board, so I would literally just one-for-one copy it in the description. The only thing I'd say is particularly important is Ancestral Guidance, and the reason for this is it gives you damage, but it's only after spending 75 spirits, so you don't want to get a Rotting Lightbringer with greater affix resource cost reduction, because it'll actually make it to where you don't spend enough resource, especially in tandem with Ring of Starless Skies. You want to have good uptime on that. If you had greater affix on this, it would actually nerf your character, so make sure to be on the lookout for that. Otherwise, everything is pretty straightforward. Heightened Malice will give you a lot of extra damage based on more enemies being poisoned near you, but you always have Rabies active with Rabid Bear, which is pretty nice, so that you're always poisoning enemies passively. And just to quickly show you, the glyphs, I have Headhunter first board. And just to quickly show you the glyphs, again, it is different in the description. I have Headhunter, Earth and Sky, Keeper, Spirit, and then Dominate is probably your best glyph because it gives you a lot of overpower scaling. When it comes to your Horadric Powers, you want to go for Corrosive Vapor, and then just put it on your Pulverize. And then Bloody Charm is probably the best one to just give you a constant execute. It's very good with the beam. A lot of stuff kind of like is bugged out for whatever reason. Like I tried using Floaty Bubble and stuff, and it just like doesn't work no matter what actual catalyst that I use. So that's unfortunate, but whatever. Then I have Sapping Crux to apply Vulnerable. This is just helpful for a little bit more redundancy, but you don't entirely need it because we do have the Vulnerable application here. So if you prefer something else, feel free to go for it. For example, if you want a more defense, Bottled Wind is quite nice because it just gives you a massive barrier, so that is very good defensively. If you're super early into the build, you want move speed, Shifting Powder is pretty decent. And then if you're doing like higher tiers of the pit, getting the Fractured Core to remove the monster's damage reduction aura is actually quite nice as well. I just like this setup for like general play. If you're using the Quacks rune, you want Reactive Ooze most likely, but if you notice that you aren't running out of resource while using the Quacks rune, yeah, you can instead just swap that to either like Gleaming Conduit, Fractured Core, or Reactive Ooze, depending upon what you want. This is just what I use for like general play. I'd probably actually rather have Sapping Crux in addition to the damage reduction thing for like speed farming sort of content, but honestly these are like so low impact it isn't that big of a deal. Ooh, I got the triple crit on the Pulverize, that's pretty nice there. Let's hit the boots. Movement speed, it's over, dude. GG. Alright, when it comes to actually playing the build, I'll probably do like a pit 90 or so. If you guys know me, you know that I hate pushing. Could probably do in this range if I played enough. I just don't really care. Once you get to a point of doing like T90s or 85s in like a few minutes, that's all you really care about. For speed farming, I'd probably do about T80s. I think my pits or my glyphs rather, are like around the 70 or 80 range. I don't know. Build is pretty easy to play with though, so I'll just show you guys some general gameplay tips. And I don't have Ahu Quacks on actually. I should probably put that on if I'm going to do a higher tier. I just replaced the Bach Jaw, so I still have Igni Cry paired with Ahu Quacks. You could also, instead of Igni Cry, do like Ohm Rune or something for 15% more damage, but I much rather like having like grouping the mobs together than 15% more damage is really not all that impactful to me. Alright, so when it comes to actually playing with it, it's very easy. At the very start of any map, you want to press Claw, and then Pulverize, then Claw, and then Pulverize, then Claw, and then Pulverize. This is to get 6 stacks of Quick Shift, which you can see down here. And then you want to activate your Grizzly Rage, and then you'll have that buff permanently. The way that I'm able to do that is by pressing, for me it's Caps Lock, but for you it'll probably be Shift. If you're on console, I don't know how you can do it. but without having to like hit a mob, you're able to cast your basic skill by standing still. If you press a button that's like force standstill or something like that, I don't remember what it's actually called. You can see in a tier 90, everything just gets absolutely mollywopped, and that's why I like having the Igni Cry there to kind of suck the mobs together. You can see it's very nice. You just suck them right into the puddle, and you can kind of do a little bit of grouping with that as well. So group them up, suck them all together, and then you just blast them down, and they just get completely annihilated. And that's pretty much it. I don't have reactive ooze on, and my resource is fine, so I guess you don't really need that. And I have the damage reduction aura on right now. The damage reduction aura does make you take a little bit more damage as well, but it's not, I'd say it isn't like too significant. Probably with my current setup, I could even like speed farm this tier, which is pretty nice, but otherwise, the build is extremely straightforward to play with. You pretty much just like one button it up. If there's like an elite pack that is particularly scary to you, or like a boss or something, you want to use your debilitating roar on cooldown, because it does give you a lot of extra damage when you press it. So right here I can just pop it, and then also these guys will do much less damage to me. You can see that pack just got nuked. This build's damage is pretty inconsistent, I would say, because there's a lot of like damage multipliers that are based on like ancestral guidance is based on spending a lot of spirit, and then there's Starless Skies, which you need 5 stacks of, and there's Heightened Malice, which is based on having a whole bunch of poison mobs near you. There's a whole bunch of stuff that's kind of just like random, so sometimes you'll see like 100 billion, sometimes you'll see like 20 billions. I'd say there's a good bit of variance, but you hit so many times, and like you don't ever do like really low damage. It's just sometimes I might kill this guy in like, I don't know, 2 hits, and sometimes I might take like 3 or 4, right? But yeah, I'd say there's not really much of a reason to do past Pit 90. You guys know me, know I don't like pushing. I think it's stupid and just a waste of time. If you enjoy that though, this build is perfect because it is very good at pushing. One thing that is worth noting, which I probably should have mentioned earlier, if you ever have a problem in like a boss fight for a pit, it's because the poison puddles bug out on a lot of boss fights, which is probably the only issue with this build. I don't know how it isn't fixed, but I've noticed that when like trying to do some higher tiers, sometimes I'll just like walk up to the boss and kill it in literally 1 hit. Other times it'll take a lot of hits because the poison puddles won't spawn, and that is a massive boost to our overall damage there. But you can see that was very, very chill, very fast. This is usually on this guy, it does bug out. Yeah, so the damage is a little bit low here because the poison puddles are bugged. It happens very regularly, to be honest with you, and you can tell that it isn't happening just because your instances of damage are smaller, and the actual, when I hit the ground, you can see that the poison splashes aren't happening. So if the poison splashes were happening, this guy would die like significantly faster. I'll kill it, and then I'll just edit in like a gameplay showing what it looks like when you actually get a boss that you can just instantly kill. I'm moving around a little bit unnecessarily, but is what it is. Guy died pretty quickly nonetheless for it being a tier 90. And that's pretty much it. Build is super easy to play with. Pretty simple. Oh, my glyphs are about 80, so yeah, I could level them up a little bit more, get a little bit of juice, but neither here nor there. Thanks for watching. Hope you learned something, and appreciate you. See you guys later.